Hi, this is Kristi Frank, and welcome to America's Leading Experts. We have a special show for you today. This one, we're bringing you the best and the brightest geeks in the country and all the information that they have. Today, I have a very special, one of my favorite, actually my favorite geeks, Mr. Rich Christiansen. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for calling me a geek. You know what? There's no greater honor, no greater title that I'd rather wear because that intonates some level of expertise.
I think it's a wonderful title, from a fellow geek to a fellow geek.
Well, thank you very much.
So, Rich, before we get started, let's hear a little about your background.
Well, I do call myself a perfectly good executive, a technology geek. Went bad. I spent the first half of my career in the corporate world. I was general manager of Mitsubishi Electric's PC division for a number of years. I was general manager of About.com for a period of time. So I followed the traditional corporate route, but got very disenfranchised with the corporate world. Midway through my career, I actually quit the corporate world and became a hardcore entrepreneur. My claim to fame is I've now founded or co-founded 32 businesses. Of the 32 businesses, I've had 11 beautiful, ugly failures, and I've now had 12 multi-million-dollar successes, all started with $5,000 to $10,000. So my geekness now is indeed, I'm a geek entrepreneur. I
love that. And you have something really exciting and brand new to talk about. Let's hear about what's upcoming for you.
Well, I've published a book with McGraw-Hill called The Zig Zag Principle, and it's my fundamental tactical steps that I take to get to success in business now. It's a counterintuitive philosophy, yet also a very natural philosophy, and that book will be coming out October 4th.
So let's talk about the Zig Zag Principle. How did you discover it?
Well, back in 2006, I was writing a book called Bootstrap Business, and as part of that, my partner, Ron Porter, and I were sitting in a room, and we were analyzing, we were actually trying to prove this principle of we could take $5,000 and build a multi-million-dollar business within a year. And so as we were analyzing what the opportunities were, we put out this big, crazy, hairy goal, and we realized it would take $300,000 or $400,000 to fund that. And we looked at each other and says, what are we going to do? And I just, in a moment of happenstance, walked to the board and went zzz, 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 and outlined we got to do this, this, and this, which was profitability, drive to resources, and then add a scale element, and outline just in a moment's flash what those elements were. And indeed, when the publisher heard that, they went nuts over it. They wanted that book, and the concept then became clarified over time.
Well, let's talk more about the Zig Zag principle. Can you give us a little more example and more depth into what this actually is?
Well, Kristi, it's actually a very natural principle. It's how we live our lives. I mean, picture yourself on a ski slope, and picture taking your skis and going straight down the mountain. It's crazy. Who does that? I often ask, how did we get to the studio today? Yeah. Did we drive directly here? No.
Right.
If you had drove directly here, you would have hit the neighbor's dog. You would have ran into the pond. You would have crashed through, and you would have had a traffic accident. You didn't drive directly here, but yet we think in business we have to set this crazy big hairy goal and charge directly for it. No wonder there's 9 out of 10 small businesses that fail. And not even small businesses, large businesses. It's crazy. Of course it doesn't work. So the Zig Zag principle really is a natural law. It's not just with business, but indeed it's a set of tactical steps that I've aligned that have fundamentally worked for me time and time again now.
When you say it's a natural law, what do you mean by it's a natural law?
Rivers don't flow in straight lines. When you ski, if you ski directly down the mountain, you break your neck. After I sold Castle Wave, this company that we created about a year and a half ago, I took my family to the Himalayas. And that's indeed where this concept really solidified, and I was able to think long and deep about this principle. Mountains don't have direct contours. What would have happened if I would have taken my family and charged directly up Mount Everest? Was it acceptable to say, oh, only 4 out of 5 of my children died, we got 1 to the top? That's lunacy, isn't it? So that's a natural law. We don't live our life in direct lines. Right. Kristi, we don't live our life in direct lines. We live our lives in zigs and zags and detours, avoiding the big, crazy, hairy obstacles. And fundamentally, that's what the Zig Zag principle is. And I would say that the Zig Zag principle, as much as being a business book, it's a life approach book that gives you permission to take some detours to avoid the crazy, big, hairy, locked doors in your lives and still get to your end destination.
I love that. Okay, so let's bring it back to business. Let's say we're starting a business. What would be the first thing I do? Where would I start to Zig?
Okay, that's a great question, and there's 3 fundamental components and 10 individual actions that take place. And so I don't mean to turn all accountant kind of, well, geekness coming out here, but I will quickly cover them. There's 3 major pieces. First, firm foundations. How do you plant your life and your business on a firm foundation that endures and lasts? I've had a lot of businesses that come and go, and I've recently been spending a lot of effort and focus on how do I get things that endure and last. So first component is firm foundations. Second is the sexy part. It's the zigging and the zagging, and indeed it's the tactical part that we've talked about. And the third is the guardrails. The third major component is the guardrails. How do I put the boundaries on this thing and get the change of behavior so I don't go head off zigging and zagging and end up in the weeds never to return? You know, the ski analogy, equally as damning, is I'm going to zig and going off in the trees and breaking your neck on a tree.
Right.
So exactly. You've got to have guardrails on the thing. So those are the 3 major components.
So let's say we take this idea, we have our foundation. How do you determine if it's a successful business, if we should continue with this idea we have?
Okay, super. And that's a great question. In the book, I have an entire section. And actually, in the last book, I have this tool that I use called the Porter model. And it's a I grew up in a rural community, and this was developed by a guy named Michael E. Porter from Harvard, and it's like, it's pretty intellectual. And so I've dummied it down to my level so that I now can real quickly, I've got exceptionally good now at saying high probability success, low probability of success. I use a tool called the Porter model. That I just will analyze these 5 or 6 variables and pretty quickly be able to assess the probability of success. So the first thing you do is indeed you throw a whole bunch of ideas out there, you assess them, run them through, and vet them through what we call the Porter model. By the way, that tool is available for free on the website if anyone wants to go to zigzagprinciple.com.
Zigzagprinciple.com.
There you go.
Okay.
And once you've vetted the concept or the idea, then you put in place a very sequential, very deliberate set of zigs and zags, and I think that's what you're driving to.
Yes, yes. So then you take that idea and you run it through the Porter model, and then you get to the, as you call it, the sexy part, you zig and zag.
Yeah, that's exactly right, and that's the title of the book. So indeed, there's 3 sequences to zigging and zagging. The first is, okay, there's my goal, don't run for it. What I do is I say, what's the quickest way that I can get to profitability? I call that dancing in my tutu. In this stage in the business, Kristi, you know, I won't dance naked. Heaven forbid no one would want to see that anyways, but you know what? I would put a tutu on, and I would go out on that freeway, and I would start dancing if that's what it took me to get to profitability. So zig 1, always drive to profitability. Zag 2 is when you add resources and you add process, and then zag 3 is always to add a scale element. And so many people get that equation so backwards. I mean, me saying that, it sounds really natural. It sounds really, of course. But here's what most people do. They scale it and then attempt to nail it.
I am one of those scaling versus nailing.
Yeah.
And it's nice to hear it so distinctly, because we think adding resources and adding a lot of ideas and ways to profit is the key.
Yeah.
But actually, you're telling us to back up and get to profit first.
Nail it and then scale it.
Yeah.
And typically that involves service, and it involves a lot of hard work and lots of, you're the butcher, the baker, and the patty cake maker in my model.
Yes.
You're a butcher, baker, patty cake maker. You're doing things you don't want to do. You're dancing in your tutu, but you're getting to profitability.
Well, that's the key. I think certain entrepreneurs reach that stage and think, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. I am doing everything. This is not my vision of how I wanted my business to go, and you stop.
Yeah.
And so that's when you're saying this is hard work. Right.
It's darn hard, and it's why I put boundaries and time frames on it. The next section we're going to talk about the guardrails. And indeed, what I've become very efficient at doing, I mean, I'm an old dude, but I'm not that old, right? So how do you have 32 businesses? How do you found or co-found? And I spent the first half of my career, although I found a few in that period too, but that's quite a big number. How do you do it?
Right.
I still fell. I just fell far more efficiently than the average person. The average person will take a stupid idea they should have had no right doing in the first place, and I've had a bunch of those. My first 6 attempts were failures. I own it. But they'll take a stupid idea, and then they'll chase 3 months, a year. 10 years later, they're doing the same stupid business that they had no right doing in the first place. The trick is fail efficiently. Get over it already, and then get on to the next one. And so my structure involves clearly identifying how to do that.
Well, that's interesting, and I think the piece that I so much like tie onto is that your emotion. You fall in love with your business, you fall in love with your idea. So to have your guardrails, your boundaries, that really gives it a system. So you talk more about your time frame on your failing efficiently, and tell us a little more about what failing efficiently is.
Well, I think failing efficiently really is putting not only a financial boundary on it, which is a guardrail. When I enter a business now, I'll say $5,000, $10,000, whatever it is, and I'm tired of the $5,000 ones because they're so small. You can do it with 500 or 5, but it just takes a whole bunch of zigzags to get there. So the bigger financial commitment, the bigger jump, the steeper the inclination can become. But you put a time boundary on it, a financial boundary, a mental capital, a relationship capital, which now you recognize is coming from our dear friend Garrett Gunderson, that you need to bound it. Garrett talks about soul purpose and going after your soul purpose. I'm the strongest supporter in the world of following soul purpose, but how many people have you met that are chasing their soul purpose and are bankrupt, and how fun is that?
Right.
How fun is it to chase your big, hairy dream and goal and then be bankrupt? It's like, I would rather do something that makes me miserable for 3 months, get to profitability, and then step ladder myself. It's the same analogy of climbing up Mount Everest. Do I just go straight up the mountain? No. I take switchbacks.
You'll get too tired.
That's right.
It's too exhausting. What, in your mind, would be a good boundary for us to fail efficiently? Let's say in that first zig to profitability, what's a good time frame? What's kind of a normal?
I always use 3 months.
Well, that's you. You're a master businessman.
Well,
you're a master builder.
I put all of my goals, my reward systems, I do it in quarterly. And you know what? They can just decrease it, but I think a quarter is a good thing.
Okay, so a 3 months
you know what? If you have a larger
goal.
amount of money, if you're starting with a small amount of money, put yourself a 3-month to 6-month boundary on it. And you know what? If you've got a large amount of capital that you're working with, when I say large, if you've got $50,000, $100,000, you can increase the breadth and bit that target up. But you better have a couple of interim measurement points. Otherwise, you may end up just, spinning in the weeds.
Are you saying with more capital, the time frame should be shorter or should be longer?
With more capital, you could actually increase the time frame to hit the ultimate goal, but you better have a couple of temperature points along the way to make sure you're not running in the weeds. Because here's what happens. Here's what happens the more money. That's why do I use $5,000? I don't have to, right?
Right.
I could probably go, well, first of all, it's to prove it, to show that I'm not an idiot and I actually know what I'm eating my own cooking, drinking my own Kool-Aid. But the other element is with $5,000, I better get profitable pretty quickly.
Right.
I better get after it and prove it and not waste a bunch of time and resources. So the reality is most of the businesses that I've started with $5,000, I'm profitable the first week.
Wow.
Not the first 3 months. It's the first week.
Wow.
And it's typically a slam dunk. I already know. And it's doing things I don't want to do. It's dancing in my tutu. The example I like to use is when we wrote the book Bootstrap Business, I swore on my life I would never do SEO for someone else. It was one of the key skills that I had, being the geek. I vowed I would never do SEO for anyone else. What do you think the first thing I did was?
You were a consultant and you did SEO.
I took $3,000, flew back to a conference to New York, stayed in a rat trap little God-forbidden hotel on the wrong side of town, and went and visited all the companies. I went into Warner Music Group and had a conversation with them, and I danced in my tutu. I did exactly what I vowed I would never do. I ended up doing the search engine optimization for Michael Bublé and Madonna and P. Diddy, PJ, whatever the rapper's name is, and all these horrible artists. But I walk out of there with a $40,000 advance with a monthly retainer, and I'm instantly profitable. That feels so. I'd rather operate profitable, being miserable for a period of time, allowing me to step ladder to the goal,
and keeping your boundaries in there, and knowing if it's only for a specific amount of time, I can do this.
Give yourself permission to be miserable. Just put boundaries on how long you'll be miserable.
Right, and that also, because as you're talking to me, I'm learning so much, and I'm in the miserable stage, but I haven't put boundaries on it, so it seems endless.
Yeah.
But if I put an end date, that makes it more tangible, and you can work yourself out of it because you know.
Brain damage is the main thing you have to control. I mean, I talk about the heart of the entrepreneur and the head.
Yes.
It's both hard, it's
Yeah.
internal and intellectual.
Yes.
And my experience is the trickiest part's the hard. It's actually getting yourself aligned to do it. I talk a lot about Pavlov's salivating dogs, and we're nothing, as human beings, we're really nothing more than a Pavlov salivating dog going, oh, please give me a piece of meat.
Yeah.
And so even on a daily basis, sometimes we have to throw a little slab of meat in front of us. If I could tell one quick story.
Please.
Back in 2001, I quit the corporate world, and I left what was deemed the most amazing job here in our city. I had an office in New York that overlooked Times Square. I was getting paid more money than, quite frankly, I should have been getting paid. I had kind of the dream corporate gig. There we go. And my wife, as we were doing our 3-mile talks one night, I was griping and complaining about how I wanted to take control of my own destiny. She stopped me, turned to me, and says, well, when are you going to do it? You're going to wait till the kids are in college? You're going to wait until now's the time. And so I quit the corporate world, and I paid my house off and saved up a year. And 3 weeks into that thing, I blew my Achilles tendon out. Laying flat on my back on my bed, sheer panic setting in, and I says, okay, all right, I can deal with this. I'm only down for like a couple of months here. So I get to rehab a couple of months later, and I start pushing it really hard. I blow it out again. The doctor tells me 6 months now. 6 months. And at that point, sheer terror enters my life more than I can ever tell you. There's one thing that got me through that period of time. That was pain. I didn't even know pain existed like that in this world. And I would get up every morning in between my psychotic episodes from the narcotics that they had me on, purple elephants floating around the ceiling.
My goodness.
And one thing got me through, and it was I envisioned my partners, a partner now was working in my basement so they could come up and visit me in between my
You needed
delusions.
some interaction.
But I would have the vision of going on a cruise and having a toast and saying, congratulations, we did it. And we put that goal out there, and it was so amazing how a year later, we actually ended up creating several multi-million-dollar businesses in that crazy, crazy period of time. There was one thing that got me through, one thing only, and it was that vision, that reward, that big slab of meat of offering that toast and saying, we did it in the Caribbean. It was actually rather anticlimactic when we did it. It was like better to dream it than it was to do it. But the reality is we as humans, we have to give ourselves slabs of meat, otherwise we get all brain damaged.
Well, the thing I love about your book is not only your stories that teach and entertain, but you give so many specific examples of how you went through it. And one of those, the reason I'm bringing this up, is you talk a lot about how you and your family do a lot of goal planning, and you're teaching your kids this.
We're nut jobs.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
We're nut jobs. You know,
it's
a lot
brilliant.
of families do sports or the theater or whatever else, and in a really what kind of way we sit around and talk Porter model and transactional analysis. And so, yeah, if you think I'm a geek, you should see my kids.
No,
I got a 15-year-old right now. My 15-year-old I would put against most 40-year-old. As a matter of fact, my favorite story is my 2nd-year-old son. He only got one A- in all of high school. And the A- he got was out of entrepreneurship. And he happened to have been the entrepreneur candidate, but the teacher had on the test a question that he fundamentally disagreed with regarding venture capital. And he refused to write the wrong question, so he wrote it out and did battle with his teacher, got an A-.
Well, the proof is in the pudding. We'll see how many companies.
How it works out.
Exactly. So you give so many great pieces of information. I've already identified within the first chapter where I fail as an entrepreneur, and it's been so helpful. But can you give our viewers some pieces of information, like what are some of the business building tools that you use? You use the Porter model.
Yeah, there's several tools that I really outline, and indeed in the Zig Zag principle, this are highlighted, and you can instantly go look at Bootstrap Business. They're also highlighted.
Okay.
I use a number of tools. I call them power tools. They're simple. They're fundamentally easy to use. I've actually got a number of these on the website also.
Great.
I use what's called the 5-minute whiteboard. With an early little team, we do 5-minute whiteboards. The 5-minute whiteboard is everyone instantly doing a brain dump of all their actions and tasks, whether they're right or wrong, then quickly prioritizing A, B's, and C's, and then having permission to go back and forth on each other's and assess the priority. It instantly gets everyone so that they know what's the critical task, what the bottleneck, I call it the Hermes, came from a book called The Goal, instantly know what the critical bottlenecks are, who's overwhelmed, who's underworked, and instant transparency. If you're having a bad week, if I'm having a bad week, everyone on the team knows I'm having a bad week, and it doesn't mean you can't have a bad week, but it's just you're fully exposed at that point. So the 5-minute whiteboard is an incredibly powerful productivity tool. And
team building, accountability, there's just so much information in addition to all the things that you shared. There's just gold.
Yeah, it's a really cool little tool. I also use a decision metrics thing, and there's a whole bunch of tools. Rather than bore you to death with them,
and
there's 4 or 5 tools you can pick up.
And zigzagprinciple.com again.
Zigzagprinciple.com has the tools on them, and then the book Bootstrap Business also outlines a number of the tools that I use.
Great. So maybe we'll end it with what one piece of advice would you give to entrepreneurs and to small business owners? What's the maybe one last piece of advice?
Can't do one.
Okay, good.
But I can give 3. I'm frequently asked what's the one key thing that you would tell an entrepreneur. The first is unalterable determination. Nice. Entrepreneurs don't succeed. I'm not the smartest. I'm not the most handsome. I'm not the most brilliant. I'm not. It's just I'm the most stinking determined person you've ever met in your life. I'm just too stupid to quit. And that's 9 times out of 10 what it takes. You have to have unalterable determination in your life. The second is if you're doing it for money, quit. Stop. Go get your day job. End of the day, driving a BMW or getting a bunch of money is very, very fleeting, and it doesn't possess enough deep internal fortitude to allow you to persist. So I think it's vital that you have a deeper, more meaningful cause that motivates you, that gets you up in the morning. And then the third is having a support system. Having a support system that when you're battered and bruised and beaten up, which is going to happen, it's just part of the equation, that you can turn to, that you can draw strength from, that believes in you when you're not believing in yourself. And I think those 3 things coupled together is the key attributes that I would aspire to successful entrepreneurs.
Well, Rich, you're one of my greatest gurus. I am honored and blessed to know and to work with you. And as I told you many times, Zig Zag is my favorite business book. It's sure to become a New York Times bestseller. It's passionate, it's insightful, it's practical, it is a blueprint for success. It's really a brilliant book.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me on the program, and look forward to seeing everyone succeed here.
Look forward to seeing you on the New York Times bestseller, and everybody check out Zig Zag Principle. Can they buy the book at that site as well?
Amazon.com or Zig Zag Principle. It's available now, launching October 4th.
Yay.
And so it's going to be a run.
It's going to be a fun ride.
It's going to be fun. Thank you.
Thank you so much
Kristi.
for all your information. And we'll see you again next time. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm sorry, there will be no other geek shows like this. This is the one and only dedicated solely to Rich Christiansen and the Zig Zag Principle. But you can see us again, and we'll see you again on America's Leading Experts.